Welcome everyone. Hello to the second edition of GameCamp Webinars. Today we will be talking about growth. So let's invite to the stage our amazing speakers and presenters. So today we will be hosting Andrej Kugonič from Nordeus. Andrej, please introduce yourself.
Okay, Mariusz, glad to be here again with you. So my name is Andrej Kugonič. As Mariusz said, I'm leading user acquisition team in a Nordeus or growth team. I'm in the industry around 5 years. Before that, I was also leading performance marketing teams in different industries and in agencies across different categories. And yeah, I hope it will be an interesting day for everybody here today, even though I only see Mariusz, but yeah, I believe there is more people.
Thank you, Andrej. Let's invite to the stage Luka Rade, who is user acquisition lead from Outfit 7.
Hi. So yeah, I'm Luka. I'm the user acquisition lead at Outfit 7. Similar like Andrej, I've been at the company now for 5 years, and hopefully, me and Andrej will be able to give you a good insight both into the in-app as well as ad-driven revenue businesses today.
And let's invite Mladen Vlasic, gaming industry manager from Adriatics.
Hey everybody, thank you, Mariusz. As Mariusz said, my name is Mladen Vlasic. I work as an industry manager for mobile gaming covering Adriatics region, which in short basically means that I have the honor to be working with these two fine gentlemen that are going to be presenting today.
Great, so let's go further. Today I will really encourage you to join Slido. Because we will be able to add some questions, vote for those questions, and we will actually then encourage our speakers to answer those questions. So even at that time, please go to the www.slide.do, and then you just write the GameCamp as the name of the event, and then you will join the GameCamp discussion at the Slido, starting from the first question, which is, please give us info which country are you connecting from. Once you join, you can actually add info, which country are you coming from. So let's wait like 30 seconds for the people to So we see some people from Poland, Serbia, Germany, Switzerland, Finland, Hungary, Croatia. Oh, we have some people from Belarus, Czech Republic, Estonia. Oh, there is someone from Canada as well. Hungary, Cyprus. Okay, more and more people coming. Maybe let's wait like 3 seconds more. Great. It's great to see so many people from so many different locations and countries. So again, please the Slido to add the questions, vote for those questions, because with that you can actually get more value and the understanding from speakers will be able to share their experience with you. If we go to the next, we are of course planning some next GameCamp webinars as well. Save the date for the next one that will happen on 8th of July. Will be focused more on monetization side. Again, please feel invited for that. Going further, so not spending more time on introduction. So let's invite our first speaker, Andrej Kugonič from Nordeus, who will be talking about one side of this growth and user acquisition part. So he will be talking about this part related to in-app purchases. So especially how we can really look at the user acquisition, looking at the different changes, factors coming with COVID as well. So thank you again, Andrej, for sharing your experience with the community and with the group. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mariusz. I see a lot of different countries, and especially big hello to somebody from Mars. I saw somebody wrote there. So yeah, let me just share my presentation. Cool. As Mariusz said, so I will be speaking about growing UA from a strategic and operational view, but taking a special look into like strategy at the beginning in general, or what it was before all these like unfortunate circumstances. Then what approach did we have in Nordeus during like COVID-19 and especially quarantine periods in most of the countries? What are our plans actually for this period and for period which comes? And then one special part for like basically importance of brand and performance marketing, or UA blend. Yeah, I hope I guess some of you already know about Nordeus. So like just in short, founded in 2010, independent mobile game studio developing only free-to-play mobile games, more than 20 nationalities in Belgrade, Serbia, and 3 live games. And the one which we are proud of the most is actually celebrated 10-year anniversary this year, or birthday, and that's Top 11. And it's played like all over the world. I know Mladen is playing it and he destroyed me today in the game, but yeah. And Jose Mourinho as a brand ambassador for us since I think 6 years ago. Cool. So that was like a short introduction. And now just to speak about UA strategy, like, and what was in our opinion called like stable user acquisition and main necessities for that, like again, as I said, like in the past years, obviously like user acquisition is like changing a lot, but some things are always like necessary, and that's to have like creative world class, more and more like it's emphasis on great creatives. And what you need really to have is like a stable pipeline, because like iterations are heavily needed and you need to have either in-house or outsourcers for that. Data is second huge part of user acquisition job. So like especially for us, this is really important, like to have, and that's IAP-driven games, to have reliable and known lifetime value curve growth, and on a most granular level you can have, so on a cohort levels. The third part is media buying, which I would say is becoming less and less important, like in terms of the daily user acquisition activities, like data and creative is becoming more important with sophisticated algorithms coming on, but you always need to have a really good knowledge of the media scene, and to have diversified channel mix with known ROI thresholds for budgeting. Industry is something that is like always changing, especially ours, mobile games, and keeping up to the date with that is something which you need for a stable results. And I was speaking a few times about this, so like basically, if you put it in one sentence, like user acquisition, that's invest money worldwide wherever you see the best opportunity. So basically, like any country's channels, platforms, like you see the best profitability, you should invest user acquisition budgets. And then the like trickiest part in that, which requires today probably the most experience doing it, is actually picking this sweet spot between overall budgets, which you will invest, and profitability. So this touches upon like payback periods, ROI, and many different things. And that is why LTV curves are so important. So you can like basically plan to maximize absolute profit from your campaigns. Cool. And then if you go to a more technical level, it's very similar thing, but you just go deeper to the lower levels of granularity, or basically like channel level, country level. And again, you need to pick carefully your daily UA scale, both in terms of budget and registrations and profitability. So we know, especially on the biggest channels, if we like push too much, we can maybe get less for more. So it's really, really important to know this and to nail it correctly. Cool. And yeah, that was just in a nutshell, like how did we approach it before? But obviously, as COVID-19 hit, there was a new reality, like in terms of like both your everyday life, but also in mobile games and user acquisition. And what changed for us is basically that in the unfortunate times, I would say we have had the luck that mobile games were something that was filling the gap with less entertainment. So people didn't have cinemas, didn't have a lot of different stuff for entertainment, and they needed to fill that gap. And that helped a lot, I guess, for most or every mobile gaming company to grow. What helped specifically user acquisition is actually CPIs, which went down, which is always nice. Like, and that happened due to less competition. So many big advertisers like travel agencies or like some other companies completely left the auctions. And on the other side, there was more than ever digital inventory. So like people were spending much more time on their phones, on internet, and basically there was more inventory to sell. And that was like a big sudden opportunity. Like I think nobody could expect this like a few months before it, so nobody like planned it ahead that much. And this is, let's say, one example what at least we saw and observed. So you can see like the red lines is a CPI, and black lines is LTV. And this is on a level of whatever. It's imaginary, but like very close to reality in relative terms. So country, Germany, Facebook, app event optimization, Android. It can be any channel or country, like we observed similar trends wherever. So basically what we saw is three things, like CPIs were decreasing, which is great, like even more drastic than in this example. But what was really good that we didn't observe, but I heard that some did, less quality from users. So basically LTVs remained the same, CPIs decreased, and what was maybe the best thing is actually that we reached scale in terms of like new registrations, which we thought that they are above maximum. So we had like more daily registrations on this level of granularity than we ever had, with obviously from this calculation much better profitability. And basically flexibility was for us the most important thing. So we really needed to react quickly, and like most did, like these are the four things. So we scaled UA budgets. We focused much more than usual on diversification in media channel mix, so adding new channels, but also leveraging the best channels, which will always, or like in the near future for sure, be the best and biggest. And we were trying from the beginning, because we saw different behavior from people, to model and at least monitor the new LTV curves, which looked stronger at the beginning. And we needed to find quick solutions. Like basically prices went down, so you buy more impressions for less price. You scale budgets to even make higher like pressure on the audience, and you need to iterate more than ever on creatives. And this is just an example like of what I said, that LTV started behaving different. So like March and April LTV is pretty visible how it grew not only like in absolute terms, but relative terms, like much quicker during those months. And then we ended up with two very big challenges, I guess, as everybody else did. So picking the sweet spot, which I mentioned at the beginning, became like more difficult than ever. So basically, like everything we do, which is based on data, is based on reliability. And that reliability was, I would say, even lower than ever. The good thing is that basically everything grew, not dropped.
Hello, Andrej.
Yes.
Like, we at the Slido, we actually, there is like the question around how long the payback we should actually expect from different types of games, especially like once we are like doing some LTV curves. Of course, like, the shorter the payback, the better. But like, in this case, we need to balance the reality. So what kind of, how long should we have this time for this LTV curves and this payback for the different types of games, like casual, more like mid-core, hardcore games?
That's a great question. Like it varies a lot. Like I don't want to dig too much into hyper casual, but I would say like that there are different factors for that. For example, like if the company, which needs to be taken into account, has problems with cash flow, obviously, like you usually make shorter like payback periods. If that's not the case, like you usually go for maximum absolute profitability, which we do. So we don't care how much invest, just to earn as much as we can from our campaigns. Also, it depends on the LTV curve a lot. So if you have LTV curve which is really strong after 6 months or 1 year and keeps people engaged and spending money, you can go with much longer payback periods. If most of the LTV is acquired in the first 3 to 6 months, then your payback period is usually lower. So you maximize absolute profit. And then the third reason, as you mentioned, is like casuality of the game, but that goes into this LTV curve, which I was mentioning before. So for us, like, because we are mostly like in mid-core, I would say, like to even like more core type of the games, it's like usually between 6 months and 1 year. It varies from game to game, but that is like, again, usual approach we take.
Thank you very much.
Cool, no problem. Great question. So yeah, the next thing is actually, I guess everybody like in mobile gaming is having their live games, but also developing new games. So like measuring like benchmarking and how is the game going became also difficult, just because like the new benchmarks are happening and we still don't have a great idea how external factors are like basically impacting retention and all other metrics. And yeah, I just wanted to here show one example of like possible scenarios, because I said that reliability is now very low. And again, these are imaginary numbers, but like this is something what usually like IAP games have as their thresholds, like for profitability. And I'm here talking about 1 year payback period, to what Mariusz was saying. So for example, in a normal scenario, like we can see that those thresholds were like 7, 14, 35% on the day 3, day 7, day 30. What we actually saw during like quarantines especially is that the LTV curve is growing much faster than usual. So like, and that's all over the games, like not game specific. So that is kind of, I would say, even expected, like people had more time, and like that is like a pretty cheap entertainment, like spending on mobile games comparing to something else. And now like there is like a question, will this LTV curve continue growing as it started? Will it go back to normal growth numbers, which were before all of this started, once quarantines are down? Or will it maybe slow down because like, yeah, people just went out and maybe like decide to like spend much less money than they would usually spend in mobile games. So the first scenario is normal. The second one is a slowdown, which is not a nice scenario to happen. But yeah, we will see. And that means like if this slowdown happens, that these thresholds are actually increasing. And that's why this is not great, because you would maybe think that having 47% ROI day 30 is great, much better like than 34%, but it can happen if the LTV curve slows down because the people behavior. This is actually just on 1 year profitability. And then like this is like a scenario which
Sorry, apologies for interrupting.
Yes.
Can I please ask a question regarding the LTV? So the game is basically like in majority monetized through in-app purchases, but there's a portion of revenue coming also from ad monetization and rewarded videos. So how do you basically calculate the rewarded video revenue in the LTV? And did you see any change like during COVID in terms of engagement when it comes to users? And then when I say engagement, basically I mean engagement in terms of not paying, but basically playing more and then maybe, watching more rewarded videos than in average.
Yeah. That's a great question. As like you said at the beginning, that's not a huge factor for us. Like it's for Luka, I guess, and he will speak more about that. We like implemented like video ads in our LTVs in our like internal BI tool. So we kind of have that in our growth metrics. But what was interesting that the biggest growth we saw was actually coming from IAP during this period. So like rewarded video kind of stayed on a very similar level, at least for us. Again, we don't have a huge focus on it, so I guess like Luka can answer this part better. But what we are definitely doing is we are like taking into account like also that and making LTV curves like also like with video ads and offer wall and everything else.
Thanks.
Cool. And yeah, this is like what we are hoping for, so that we have a strong start, which was caused by the external factors, and on the other side, on a product side, us as a company or a product team giving much more content for people to play during this period, and that the growth will continue in a normal level, and that will make these thresholds lower, which is a happy scenario. So now I will just go through a bit of a plans about this. Again, it's hard to say post-COVID because it's still here, not maybe in so many countries with quarantines, but yeah, it's still like present, and we don't know what will happen in the future months, in autumn, but some things can be planned based on the learning we got from the previous few months. And for us, we know at least what to expect. Like in this period, like we know that, which is already happening, CPMs are going up, but they are lower than before. Like, so people are still spending more time at home and less advertisers. And if like any wave happens or whatever, they will probably go down again a lot, which is like opportunity for which, at least for like a user acquisition, for which it needs to be prepared. Demand after like COVID-19 already in this period is visible, will be lower than during. And that will be visible probably in organic registrations for everybody. And LTV curves like will probably start behaving much more closer post-COVID to what it was before. So I wouldn't expect this strong growth to continue what we had in these few months. And what I'm also observing, and speaking with people, but also seeing in auctions, is that mobile gaming budgets will stay high. I don't expect a decrease in budgets or big ones, just because like opportunities still there, not maybe that much, and a lot of companies like earned a lot of revenue in this period, which they can use for staying competitive. And again, this is like some of the ideas. Like, I definitely think this is a good approach to keep budgets high and to stay competitive, like not to lose market share. Diversify channel mix as much as you can to decrease pressure on the biggest, and maybe some of them are even saturated channels. So not to overspend, but to try to diversify, because that's much slower process. It's much easier to like increase on the existing ones, and this is much slower, but I think good process. And still, like you will have the biggest budgets like on the biggest channels, but that is fine. I'm especially like eager to see, like to monitor like quarantine cohorts and to see what will happen with LTV out of these cohorts, because that can be a huge learning for what's to come. From personal side, I hope that will not come, but yeah, it's always good to be prepared. And for the near future planning, I think it really makes sense to plan only near future, not that much long term in this situation. And how are we kind of preparing for it? Like, as I said, flexibility and agile approach, developing different scenarios and trying to see what is the most possible. Reliable outsourcers ready. This is especially important learning for us. I really like to focus on all in-house teams, especially regarding creatives. But what we learned here is that like that can quickly become bottleneck if you scale budgets a lot. So to at least have them ready, like reliable outsources, and to test them in the following months. Model quarantine LTV ROI curves, and fill the gap with less entertainment, not only with user acquisition, obviously, but also to try to think about what you as a mobile game, as a brand, can give to people in these situations.
Andrej?
Yes?
Can I have the question?
Sure.
Yes, actually, there is like one question around your like different testing of the channel, like like let's see, like one of the channels does not deliver really good results, but then you hear like, okay, it works for many like other companies. It kind of seems to be promising. It's growing on the market. What is your approach? Because on one side, in this case, you were mentioning like trying to sometimes diversify the media mix, but then of course there is sometimes the challenge around attribution, maybe not delivering the results. What is like your approach towards testing? You are testing again, or like how do you work with that?
So basically how we approach it is like that we always have like a dedicated testing budget, like and dedicated core budget. Like core budget is something that is proven and that works good, like Google obviously, and Facebook, and some of the biggest players and channels. But we always have like a testing budget on a monthly level when we test, and if something proves to have value, it goes into the core budget. If it doesn't, we iterate. And yeah, basically like the main KPI is ROI, like which we try to achieve. Cool. And one more interesting thing is traditional media in the mix. Maybe like some of you already started with this, like TV. I think the prices are cheaper, and not only for UA, but for branding, like incorporating like some campaigns with YouTube and TV can have a great results long term. Not short term, but long term, yes. Cool. And this was like a perfect transition, like to actually this part of the presentation, which is like something that was like done during this month around the brand, and specifically top 11. And this was like really important to us to nail perfectly, like because we believe that that is something that is keeping top 11 high and a leader in football management, investing in brand. So the first thing was like giving back. This was more on a Nordeus like umbrella, but also like we are best known for top 11. So like this was an internal donation campaign, like when many team members reach out how to help, and basically everybody donated, and and contributed with 150,000 euros to UNICEF Serbia, helping with all the equipment for the country. The second one on the right was raising awareness. This was sharing is caring, basically trying to spread the word, which was recommended from the World Health Organization, and giving rewards in game if you do so. So basically incentivizing people to spread the word and helping the fight. The third thing was again top 11 related on the left. I think many mobile games took this opportunity to help with Play a Part Together campaign, which was basically promoting social distancing through playing mobile games, which was perfect for that period. And then the last but not the least is we are a football game, and we really try to keep football conversations going, just because there was a lack of football, and we really wanted as a football brand to help people somehow stay connected with football, with many social media activations and celebrating at home football moments and stuff like that. And why are we focusing this much? Well, basically, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are celebrating 10 years for Top 11. It's a big milestone for us, and we really believe that the brand is something that is keeping us high, and our user acquisition in a really good form. So it's really important to have that blend. And the market leader role is something really important, because then every other game which comes up with a similar thematic and game name will be behind you. Also, re-registrations and organic registrations is something which is heavily dependent on your brand power. Lower CPIs, obviously, with better IPMs. If something is a known brand, it catches attention much quicker and better than something which is not. Longer player lifetime. So I mentioned, we have a long payback periods, and that is possible just because people are staying a lot in the game and playing it. I think we have a lot of people who are still playing the game since 10 years ago. So that's brand is really helping with that. And obviously franchise possibility. You can use the brand to develop other games in the future. And just a small part of how to align UA with brand, some small tips, few tips, how do we approach it? So we basically don't do shady ads, let's call them like that. So extreme fake ads, or I call them COVID-19 teasing ads. So we really try to avoid this and to go completely socially responsible in UA. Not looking at only performance metrics, cherry picking placement, set copies. So again, trying to catch attention, but not in a shady way. Play on our strong sides. As I said, there are different strong sides for different games, but what we like to use is, for example, brand ambassadors in our game. And we always try to make our game logo very visible. I mean, you can have millions of registrations, but you will probably have billions of impressions, even though they don't install. It's good to remember your brand. And these are a few different types of ads we are making. The first one is celebrity ads. This guy on a shoulder, small guy, is Mourinho, and our recent ad from the last year. In the middle is a cinematic ad. That is a really, really powerful creative approach to ads for us. And on the right is actually very easy to make, a gameplay ad in which you basically show the most interesting part of your game, the most emotional. And yeah, that was basically it. Just to summarize everything said, basically what we noticed is, as I mentioned, player behavior is different. So in any IAP-driven game, I believe we need to learn about LTVs, monitor and model new ones as a new and big learning. Obviously, there was, everybody knows, a big UA opportunity, so you need to prepare for it if that happens again from all sides, creative, channel mix, and everything else. Investing in brand, I would say, is really like a smart way to go, like in mobile games. Not a huge portion of the games is doing it. But the ones who did it are in extremely good situation, and these times are really uncertain and sensitive for brand more than ever, and flexibility and agile. I think like mobile games companies as they are not too big, and that is advantage for us, like comparing to some other industries, to be much more flexible and agile. Yeah, that was it. I hope you heard me, because I'm not seeing anybody, so hope I didn't speak with myself. Marius will confirm, but that was it. So if you have any additional question, I'm here.
Thank you, Andrej, for the great presentation. Yeah, there was like a lot of questions, and actually we will tackle them, just a few now, and then of course after like your and Luka's Luka presentation, we will actually have some short discussion panel as well. So actually we'll use those questions as well. So please actually add those questions via the chat on YouTube and via Slido, because again, that's and vote for those questions that are actually especially interesting for you, because then we have better guidance which of them to choose once we don't have enough time for that. Yeah, that was actually one question to you, Andrej, from the audience around the geos and the countries that were like most important for you before and after the COVID. Did you see really significant changes to that extent that you like really changed a lot in your at least long-term approach towards user acquisition?
Well, in terms of a country mix, I wouldn't say nothing changed much. Basically, as I said, like the more unfortunate situation was in some countries, like the bigger opportunity was in terms of cheaper prices and everything else, but they changed month to month. But for us, yeah, nothing drastically changed in that terms, like especially now. So like we are just like having very similar approach, just with more opportunity.
Maybe Mario, should I ask one more question before Luka starts, because it's kind of top 11 specific, and I think it's interesting to hear basically to everybody, like top 11 is here for 10 years now. Like I'm personally playing it for the last 5 years, quite successfully, as Andrej mentioned before the presentation. Like I know it's a hard question, and probably there's not a short answer to it, but like could you please comment a little bit on how did basically UA approach change during the years? Because like now you're kind of in a maturity phase with top 11, and how are you shaping the strategy given that game is getting older and older? And if you would reflect now to like 5 years ago, like did anything significantly change in a way that you were acquiring users in comparison to today?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question and a huge question for us. Like, obviously, we went through all stages in mobile gaming, and both in user acquisition and product life cycle. What is great is that the industry, like both in terms of advertising and mobile gaming, is changing, I would say, to better. So, for example, in product-wise, we are definitely in a maturity phase, but what is good with all the live events and everything which happened in the last years is that actually in maturity phase you can grow. Like, and that is like one thing which on a product side was obviously really great for us, like that we are growing like after 10 years. Like, so that is like that is great. And the other side is UA and like how we approach UA. And that changed mostly due to, I mean, Google, Facebook, and sophistication of like all the algorithms and everything done through platforms. So basically, UA job went to be more strategic level and less operational, tactical level, which is great, like because those operational technical things, algorithms are doing much better, like which were really time consuming. And that was the biggest change, that less people can manage like huge budgets, and have better performance. So once that started changing on the biggest players, again, I'm mentioning Facebook and Google, but obviously on most of channels, our also performance got much better. Because we tried to leverage all of that since the beginning. As you know, as soon as we have opportunity to try something, to test it, and most of those things remain as are like one of the most important tactics in user acquisition, like optimizing for ROAS or purchases, and that I think also helped a lot to scale UA budgets and also us. So yeah, it's in general it's like a positive trend, like which you wouldn't expect in a maturity phase. So that's I would say the main thing. And necessity for creatives, as I mentioned, became throughout the years more and more important and bigger.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrej, for a great presentation. Of course, stay with us because after the Luka's presentation, we will have the short discussion panel. And now let's invite Luka Rade, who is user acquisition lead at Outfit 7, and he will be talking about other side of user acquisition, other dimension. So he will be talking about user acquisition in the life and in the world of the ads-driven games. So how it differs, how actually can be tackled from tactical, strategy, and operational perspective. Hello, Luka.
Hey, thank you, Mariusz. Okay, so as Mariusz said, today I'll be covering the paid UA in the ad-driven gaming business, and hopefully that my presentation will complement Andrej's presentation nicely in a way that you will get, let's say, a good idea as to what the main differences are between the ad-driven and the in-app driven gaming business. So first, a little bit about Outfit 7 is that we have just reached recently 13 billion downloads, and we have up to 415 million monthly users playing our games. We're also reaching, billions of views on different video platforms, both on YouTube as well as in China, which has specific platforms. We're constantly ranked both as a publisher and individually for our titles among top companies worldwide in terms of download, with the most recent success in My Talking Tom 2, which is now almost 2 years old, actually. And we're expanding, both in the Infinite Runner universe. So we have 2 titles here, and Talking Tom Skyrun will be joining us in fall 2020. And as a leader in the Tamagotchi apps with My Talking Tom IP, of course, we've just recently last week added the My Talking Tom Friends game, which has actually been our biggest global launch up to date. And also a small thanks goes to the Google team, for extensively featuring us on pre-registrations. And, we were able to accumulate more than 13 million pre-registrations there. So thank you, Mladen and Mariusz, again for that. But today we'll be talking about paid user acquisition, so for the ad-driven gaming business. And the main part here is to understand how paid user acquisition actually places itself on the map of user acquisition. And as the name suggests, when we're talking about paid user acquisition, we're talking on buying the ad inventory in exchange for money, basically. So the main difference with organic here is that we are advertising either in apps, web, social media, or even TV. And how it differs from cross promotion is that in general, cross promotion for us is free. Obviously, there are some opportunity costs because we're not showing other people's ads within our games, but instead showing our ads. So there is this opportunity cost and a small fee to serve Radius as well. And one thing that I have learned in my 4 years working as the paid user acquisition manager at Outfit 7, is just the immense value that data has. So we need to understand that, like Google and other social giants and also other ad networks, they're collecting a lot of data to improve their algorithms, to improve their behavior. And this is pretty much exactly what anyone should be doing, with their proprietary data. It's of the biggest importance when doing paid user acquisition, because especially in the ad-driven business, there is a fine line between running a profitable campaign as well as a campaign that's running at a loss. So just to tackle the main differences between the ad-driven and in-ad-driven gaming business quickly, is that in general, production cycle for the ad-driven games is shorter, and there's more focus on the core gameplay. So the reason why the production cycle is also shorter is due to the fact that the monetization is in a way more simple. Like anyone who plays can be a value generator for the publisher or developer. And this also means that soft launches usually will be shorter. The focus here is on the retention as well as monetization. Whereas for the in-app-driven games, there's a lot of focus on fine-tuning the game economy, not making it too expensive or too hard, but making it challenging enough for people to returning to the game. Another important focus is that when it comes to targeting, due to the fact that everyone can be a value generator for the publisher, the target is basically very broad. Like anybody can be a valuable player for us. And this also means that due to the fact we're not very interested in finding specific key pockets of players, like maybe Andrej and the Nordeus team are, we're really focusing on the IPM in order to decrease the eCPA, so the cost of acquisition, to make our campaigns much more efficient. So before we talked about how data is one of the key aspects of the ad-driven gaming business and the advertisement of it. So if we just look at it quickly, we see that when it comes to the in-app purchases, the lifetime value calculation is fairly simple, because it's just the amount of in-app purchases minus the store fees that dictate the lifetime value of user. And usually it's also very easy to calculate the value of each user because it's level attributable and it has a value appended next to it. Whereas when it comes to the ad lifetime value of user, it can really it can depend on how much are you willing to invest in it. Because in very basic form, it's just a function of the ARPDAU and retention. But this is often not enough, simply because a lot of times we're buying in different markets with different networks and on different publishers, and the value of users that generate there can be vastly different. So for a more granular calculation, we need more data, and we need to also have it on a user level as much as possible. So if we're just talking about a simple formula of the ARPDAU and retention, we see on the chart, the red line is basically what would define a game with a normal retention and normal monetization. And the orange line indicates a game that still has a normal monetization, but a higher long-term retention. And the blue line is, in terms of retention, the same as the red line, but it just has higher monetization. So we can quickly see that both monetization as well as retention pretty much define and dictate how your lifetime value curve will behave. So the one of the negatives about this calculation is that usually breakdown is very limited, either be to on a country and platform level, but you cannot definitely use this on a user level. And then we have the opposite of this, so let's say in an ideal scenario, we would know what the value of each impression that a user was shown in an ad was, and at the same time that impression was user attributable. So in this case, we would have a perfect calculation of ad lifetime value. And due to the fact that it would be user attributable, that means that it can also be then aggregated on any random dimension, like country, creative used, publisher that has delivered, install, and so forth. But the main negative about this calculation is that, let's just say, it's pretty much impossible. because with the more ad providers you're working with, the harder this gets, because it requires total transparency from all parties, and at the end of the day, this is either not possible or very unlikely to achieve. And at the same time, this just means, that probably the cost benefit of such calculation is not worth it.
Luka?
Hi, Mariusz.
Short question, actually.
Okay.
I think it's interesting in terms of what you discussing. Like, if we look at the adult TV, there is a question there is a lot of aspect that is hard to influence once you are doing UA for such games like mediation, ECPM, and in many cases it's very hard to measure that at the user level. As I understand, to which extent do you think it's kind of the barrier, or because at least I even have chosen this question because I even saw a lot of situations when people were trying to do very sophisticated system, trying to do it at the user level, trying to approach it in sometimes a little bit similar way to IAP-driven games. What do you think about that?
Okay, so actually I was hoping that maybe the next slide would be answering this a little bit more in depth. But the truth is, that there's no universal right answer for this. It just depends on your resources, on your needs, and how much you're able to put focus on this. So if I may, I'll try to explain it on the next slide a little bit better, what we might consider, being the optimal between those two solutions. Great. Okay. Here it is. So what's then the sweet spot of actually calculating the lifetime value of users? We believe that the previous calculation where you would have an actual LTV, that it's nearly impossible. It's something that it's probably not going to be worth stressing over. So focusing on knowing how many impressions each user has seen from each ad provider and on each ad type, so banner, video, interstitial, etc., and what the value of those impression was on average should be good enough, because at the end of the day, this is going to even out a little bit. So yes, you might have a couple of percentage deviation, in either way, in positive or negative, but because you're operating under the assumption that every ad impression is worth the same amount, but at the end of the day, those small errors will even out. And combined with your mobile measurement partner data, so with the platform you're using to track this data, you can then easily aggregate still this on dimensions like country, platform, network, publisher, etc. So another point that actually Andrej was talking about it before is responsiveness. So if we're just talking about this current situation of COVID-19, and we see the lifetime value of users over time. So the left line indicates the start of lockdowns and the right line indicates the end of lockdowns. We see that the lifetime value of users can actually vary quite a lot in a fairly short period of time. So in this regard, it's very crucial to be able to react quickly to such changes. And in this case, having automatization like API connection and stuff like that saves you a lot of time and helps you focus on strategic importance of user acquisition instead of the operative. But a lot of times the issue with ad-driven gaming business is that monetization just isn't good enough. So what then? If we look at the formula, we see that ad lifetime value of users is nothing more than an average revenue per day on active user times the retention of that user. And as you can see, the UA team's role here is very limited, because the ARPDAU is influenced through the ad monetization team, whereas the retention through the product. So obviously the cooperation between the UA team as well as other teams here is very important. But at the end of the day, UA team will not have a lot of influence on the revenue here. So where can we actually have an impact then? If we look at the ROI formula, we see that obviously next to the revenue, we can always impact the cost. And that doesn't mean that we just stop doing the paid user acquisition altogether. It just means that we need to focus on things that indirectly influence the cost, and one of them is the IPM, so the install per million or installs per 1,000 impressions. And this is one thing that I would say when it comes to ad-driven gaming business is the most important thing if you want to keep your games competitive in the UA world, because great creatives actually decrease the cost and increase the number of impressions and open up new pockets of traffic tremendously.
Luka, sorry, can I bother you with one question? So you mentioned the IPMs and the creatives, and then obviously the LTVs being lower in the ad monetization world, which kind of makes it sometimes a problem to enter the market. Meaning that, like, what are you doing in terms of collaborating with the product team and creatives team to kind of exchange the behavioral data and to kind of try to find the touch points within the app that might be ready for an optimization to kind of increase the LTV curve maybe from 10 cents to 11 cents, which can actually be a break-even point for you to enter a market and become profitable, or to scale from, I don't know, 100 installs on a platform to 10,000 installs, because like that's basically the cases that we have been seeing sometimes on some markets.
That's a great question. So one thing, as mentioned, how we can influence on this is that as a UA manager, we see a lot of numbers on the creative side. We tend to see what can and will perform. We have our learnings, but at the end of the day, sharing this learning with the product team can be extremely beneficial. For example, if I just use my Talking Tom 2 as an example, we have seen many times again that emotional hooks tend to really sell the game well. And so this is also one thing, that we communicate then with the product team, that they should be focusing a lot more also on these emotional hooks within the game, because they can also then affect the retention and with this, the monetization of the game.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that's in short.
Thanks.
Okay, to further continue on the campaign strategy. So this is actually one thing I would say it's probably easier with the ad-driven games than the in-app driven games. So while you do have, let's say, the challenge of low lifetime value of users, the truth is, because every user can be monetizing, through the ads, there will not be like a huge deviation between the lifetime value of users as it can happen in the in-app purchase games, like on the Nordeus site, for example. So this means that if you're acquiring engaged users that play and spend time in the app, you'll be likely to monetize them well. So you shouldn't really be that concerned about this. But this also has, let's say, a little bit of a drawback, because we discussed earlier that Google and other platforms, have done tremendous leaps going forward into the machine learning algorithms and stuff like that. But at least from our side, we have seen, that ad-driven paid UA usually responds much better when we're targeting shallow events, like either install reaching level 2 and stuff like that. So events that a big percentage of users reach them and reach them fast, but at the same time that they're still good indicators of high quality users. So we're not really focusing that much on the events that are way down the funnel. So why we have found that this doesn't work, at least for us, probably for a lot of ad revenue titles, but I can speak from our experience, is that, again, the lifetime value of user deviation is fairly small when it comes to ad revenue titles. And this means that a player that has reached level 1 may not have a 10 times lower lifetime value than a player that has reached, for example, level 50. But when doing user acquisition, if we're targeting a very rare events, so events that are not achieved by many players, we'll see that the cost of acquisition then just grows disproportionately higher than the lifetime value of users. So the ROI curve cannot follow this trend then. Another topic is, do channels where we get our traffic differ? And here I would say in general, no. I would put, let's say, an asterisk to it, because it's very important to know your audience. For example, when we're talking about Google and other social giants, we can see from the ad monetization side, that their traffic is more expensive, and there's a good reason behind it. They have a much more sophisticated algorithms behind it, much more sophisticated targeting capabilities, and you always put a premium on this. And if you don't really have a great benefit of using these solutions, like we might not in the ad-driven gaming business, then you might actually ask yourself, but why would I even want to buy on those traffics on those channels at all? But the truth is that, at least for us, for example, YouTube performs extremely well because of the Talking Tom and Friends IP. But again, we're aware, that this might not work well for a hyper casual game where there's no IP behind it at all. And while Google and other social giants are still very important for us, we also focus a lot on, let's say, SDK networks, because they do have cheaper traffic, but at the same time they still do deliver valuable quality traffic for us. So due to this, I would say that your strategy, will differ on a channel based on the fact if you have even an IP to begin with or not, and also on how well your game actually monetizes through the ads. But there certainly is opportunity on all of those channels for you, just like there is an opportunity for the in-app purchase games. Another thing is exploring the new opportunities. So again, here there might be a little bit of an advantage compared to the in-app driven business, because when we're talking about ad-driven gaming, as mentioned before, lifetime value user has normally very low deviation. And this means that the sample size needed to establish a certain geo, if it's even valid to pursue, can be lower. So the cost of entry is lower in this case, and you can really focus more then on the creatives and localization, putting the investment there instead of buying the traffic. So to sum it up, I would say that the very important part is data. So data is king, and just the quality of input that you'll have here will be determining the quality of maximum output you're going to have. And lifetime calculations in ad-driven business, I would say, are probably even more important, because the margins of error in, let's say, tier 3 countries, such as maybe India, Indonesia, can be so small that even 1 or 2 cents can actually be a determining factor between a profitable campaign and running campaign at a loss. You should always have a certain testing budget. It's up to you if you want to define it's going to be a certain percentage of it, but you should be willing to invest into testing, because even if you fail tests 10 times, if you make it the 11th time, it's something that could actually give you a competitive advantage. Then you should also focus on automatization. So like Andrej said before, the difference between a couple of years ago and now is that UA managers should be more focused on strategy, and at the same time they should have more time, because a lot of things can now be done automated, and they shouldn't be losing time over, let's say, some operative stuff that can be done through the API or through the algorithms. And obviously exploring the markets. We all see US and Western Europe as the most appealing ones, maybe Korea and Japan. But at the end of the day, again, like Andrej said, invest wherever you see the biggest opportunity. And this might be Brazil or Russia, and they might not have that big of a lifetime value, but you could probably see higher ROI margins there, and the amount of traffic that you'll be able to get there might be a lot bigger. So it obviously depends on the game, but you should be willing to explore those markets, because usually you'll also see a lot less competition there, and this just means that your ROI there can be bigger. So all in all, I think this is it, and as far as I know, we'll be now moving to the question part.
Great, Luka. First of all, thank you so much. It's a great presentation. So I have the honor to start with the questions. So I'll basically ask a question that probably is more aimed at Outfit 7 and Talking Tom. So we talked a lot about the LTV and UAs and how basically to get a positive ROI. But when buying apps at scale at cheaper prices, which is basically what is happening in the ad monetized world, there's also an effect that happens on the organic installs, also known as K-factor. So can you please comment a little bit on it in terms of how are you calculating and how are you going about it when it comes to calculating the ROI of the campaigns?
Okay. So I would say for now, that K-factor is not something that's static, even in a single geo, so in a single country. It's something that we see it dynamically changes, and the K-factor might be different when you're ranked, let's say, 100 on the App Store versus when you're ranked 50th on the App Store. So this is something that we do have in mind, and I would say that we have this advantage over many developers or publishers, where we have huge amount of data available to us, so that we're able to maybe even do calculation on much smaller geos here. But in general, K-factor is something that we're not that focused on keeping in our profitability calculations overall.
Thanks. Mariusz, you're muted.
You. I think with that, actually, we can move to this questions part, that actually we can discuss. And I think there is like some interesting questions already. Like one of the questions that is coming out quite often is about how actually you are trying to measure the effect of some traditional brand activities, because actually both of you mentioned about that. You are putting quite strong focus on that. So if you could actually elaborate a little bit about that.
Cool. Maybe I can start. So does this mean, like, this first question, Mariusz, like how do you attribute like traditional media, right?
Yeah. And how you measure effect of that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's different. Like if the question is how do you measure traditional media comparing to how do we measure brand impact on UA? So traditional media, we use mostly TV, or like almost only TV, and there are some pretty like nice, like I would say, attribution models in which you basically follow like just in a nutshell, like when the TV airing happens, like in which minute actually, and then you check for those small organic spikes. If I'm not mistaken, it's from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. So like you basically measure like organic uplift compared to the baseline in the next few minutes, like 15 to 30 minutes. And then you like basically like know your LTV in specific country of organic installs, and you can measure the ROI. And that is like completely like UA performance approach to using traditional media. Branding is obviously quite different. We measure different things if we use like any media, not only TV for branding. Like we don't focus that much on ROI, or not at all, but much more on brand metrics like awareness, consideration, and stuff like that, intent.
But are you trying in some way, for example, to look at what is response towards your creatives? Like how actually is there any additional effect coming from like knowing your name, understanding your brand?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely also, I mean, when we use, for example, when we use TV, we're also double checking what is happening with click-through rates in our digital campaigns, like, and there was a visible effect, like when we use like basically TV, like there was a visible effect on click rates on any digital channel, like increase, obviously. So that's multi-touch, like model. So it's if that was what you was referring to.
And Luka, how does it look like on you, or how does it look like on your side?
Okay, so obviously anyone who would come with the solution to this would instantly be a millionaire. The problem, obviously, with the traditional media is that there's no click that's attributable on a user level. So when we're talking about attribution, it's not possible on a user level. When we're looking at the aggregated data, there are different mathematical models. One of them is just looking at what happens with your product in countries where you're advertising on traditional media versus on countries where you're not. Or even, if you have multiple products, what happens with those products that you're not advertising currently in that same country we're currently advertising one of your products. So let's say calculating this delta is one way of knowing what the impact may be. But like Andrej said, another good way to see if the media actually works is also to see if it impacts on your performance marketing. So if you see any click-through or I2C, IPM increases. So yeah.
Great. And there is the question around how you set the targets for your UA campaigns. Do you have the targets for all your campaigns separately? Do you have targets per geo, or do you have the ROAS platform? How actually you are dealing with that complexity that comes with using so many different channels? Maybe starting from you, Andrej.
Okay, I was waiting for that. So yeah, if you're talking about ROI targets, right? I guess that's the question. So what we kind of observed is that if we are not using incentivized traffic, the LTV curve behavior is pretty similar across channels and across countries. So obviously some cohorts are much lower quality, from some countries than comparing to other countries, or some channels comparing to some other channels. But after the day 7, the growth is pretty similar. So that makes our lives easier. And we have pretty similar ROI thresholds for all geos and channels we are using.
I would say, sorry.
And yeah, and we use usually day 3, day 7, and day 30. So day 3 is initial signal, day 7 initial signal, and day 30 strong signal.
Thank you.
I would say that in general we also have a similar experience, that there's not a very big deviation between different geos in terms of performance as well as the targeted goals here. So
thank you.
There was an interesting question about creatives, so I would open that topic as well, because it's one of the main levers in the automated marketing world that actually we can use to optimize the campaigns. And there was an interesting one basically asking if you have seen a creative having a phenomenal IPM, but basically having a zero impact on in-app purchases or on ROAS, meaning that creative was amazing to get the users to the app, but those were not basically the users that were using the app in a way that you would expect it. And maybe just to complement it from my end, with the second question is on what are the main ways of testing the creatives for you, what channels and what are the main metrics that you're using before saying, okay, this one is basically a great creative to go live on more markets or with a higher budget.
Okay, so who starts? I guess I'll go. Okay, so I think actually that Andrej might have a little bit more to say here, but as mentioned before, any user that's online and that's going to be playing our games will probably see ads, and through them, we'll monetize. So that means that as long as we get the user in and we have a decent retention, so decent engagement, then they'll be monetizing just fine. We did see some creatives that in fact did bring users in more efficiently, and then the quality of those users has been, let's say, below that of the best ones. But again, the deviation here, at least on the ad side, is not that great. So that's in short. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I can add on top of this, Mladen, you already said, one big learning which we learned on our skin, and that is to check beyond CPI, but that was 5 years ago. So yeah, basically, definitely what is important for us is IPM, as for everybody, CPI in general. But what we look more is not cost per install, but cost per retain day 1 user. So we know that a lot of creatives can have really good CPIs and IPMs, especially if you casualize them for mid-core games and like hardcore games. But they usually don't retain a lot of people. So like we cannot obviously check ROI, which would be perfect because we don't have enough scale on a creative level when we are testing creative. So it would be very unreliable. We check it, but it's not like a main signal for us. Like the main signal is cost per day one retained user. So like that's, I would say, like or IPM going up to that, like so even further down the install. Yeah, and we are testing it like that's also like a big topic. That was, I think, the second part of the question. Like basically we are changing the ways how we are testing creatives. Like there is obviously not like I spoke with many people, and we also did many tests how to do it and where to do it. So we are basically changing it like from time to time. But what we like to do, because algorithms are so sophisticated these days, is just basically to put them in campaigns and to see will they get traction and traffic, and what will be the performance of it. You have a downside there, like kicking out of in the learning phase, blah blah. But yeah, all, in my opinion, current creative testing processes have flaws and pros. But yeah, that's why we are testing it constantly to find the best way.
And actually, to build on even on that question, because there was like very interesting question around using different platforms. Actually, how much of this different targeting, like manual stuff, are you using, and how much of the stuff is done like by you leaving to algorithm? How actually you are dealing that complexity, or actually you are, because always like some automation versus some like tendency to being free control and like similar stuff. Maybe Andrej, starting from you.
Cool. So basically, yeah, we are doing manually and testing a lot whatever can be tested manually. Like so, for example, I think like again, as I was mentioning in presentation, like but especially on Google, like you don't like basically target a lot, like target audience because of the nature of what's. But what you can test is how it is behaving comparing to different budgets, like and there you need to find the sweet spot. On Facebook it's a bit different. There you can like change like the percentage of lookalikes you are using comparing to the budget you want to like spend, and as wide as you go, the less quality of the audience you usually get. So like you have like you need to check like CPI versus LTV ratio. But I would say like the most important thing for us currently is basically testing events. And that's where we like to also try with some custom events, not only like default ones, like and optimizing towards, I don't know, the first purchase, but to try out with some custom events which are happening enough in the first few days and are predicting high quality of a user. So that's one thing which we are focusing a lot. Obviously, not only us as a UA team, but working a lot with the data scientists on that.
Luka, and you? Do you have maybe to add something? I think, Luka, you muted.
Okay, so sorry, I got auto-muted. Anyway, so yeah, like Andrej said, this is something that we're also testing a lot. So these custom events that indicate good quality users, but that not maybe like the most classical events like the in-app purchase or whatever. And obviously we see a lot of opportunity here, especially on Google and other strong platforms with strong machine learning algorithm behind it, and we see also good success, at least initially, which just shows that also people at Google, despite hiding everything from the campaigns as of late, you still know what you're doing when it comes to delivering good quality traffic.
Thank you.
Anyways, I see a question regarding in-app events and in-app optimization of UAC campaigns. That's also kind of a question. Maybe Luka aimed more towards the ad monetized games because that's a little bit more, I would say, not fixed a field of choosing which is basically the best possible event to start with, to try to see if it makes sense to bring users at scale, but not to optimize towards install, but optimize towards something that's actually showing an engagement of the users. I know you mentioned it a little bit in the presentation, but I see it coming up as a question on: have you seen any success with this kind of strategy?
Okay, so in short, yes, we see this. Obviously, the lifetime value curve, or let's say the return on ad spend curve here, is a little bit longer, but we have seen success with such events, like watch 10 or 30 videos or whatever. So the key part here is, just to have this strong analytic background here in knowing what percentage of user reaches such events, how fast, and how much better they will be because of reaching such events compared to your average user. So there's going to be always, finding this fine line for you, because I would say that such events will differ from product to product. So, even within the Outfit 7 on different products, we would have different events that we would target in such campaigns. And it will probably also a little bit of a trial and error here. But as mentioned before, such events would also enable you to bid higher and also open up new pockets of players that you weren't even reaching before. So in theory, it could also open up a whole new world of user acquisition for you as an ad revenue gaming business.
Thanks. Mariusz, do you want to go further with the questions? I think Mariusz is frozen when it comes to connection. So maybe we can go with the next question in line. So, have you changed anything in the game during this period in terms of monetization, or were you just experiencing the impact of COVID on your numbers? I assume that's applicable basically both to Luka and Andrej. So whoever wants to pick it up.
I can just give a short answer on this. So basically, we really try to be user focused during all this period. And what does this mean? That we try to give much more content in our games to play with. If they are spending more time, having more time, we try to, for example, we gave more free entries to live events than we usually did. We gave much more quests, or it's called special sponsor in top 11, to play with and to try to reach and to have just basically more meaningful time to spend in game. Obviously, some of that had an impact on metrics, but that wasn't the main focus during the period. But more or less just to try to satisfy the need of playing more games, and that's what we were focusing on in the game. And we introduced a big new feature in which you beat me today, actually, and that's friendly championship. And yeah, basically, I would say even a really good moment for that, just because multiplayer was more popular than ever during this period. So especially playing with friends and people you know. So that was a big thing introduced during the period.
Okay, so from our side, nothing majorly changed in the game during this period. Obviously, we did notice a lot of shift in monetization because, as you can imagine, a lot of classical advertisers, such as, car, travel, etc., have, let's say, decreased their spending budgets, and this also showed on the monetization on our side. But also, as Andrej said in his presentation, we have also seen an increased supply of ad space also on the UA side. So this also, in terms, caused the CPIs to drop. So in a way, coming out of this COVID-19 situation, I would say that the gaming has probably, one of the winning industries overall.
Cool, thanks. Anyways, going to the next question in line regarding CPI's decreases while LTV is quite constant during quarantine. Like, was that the tendency noticed for users acquired by each channel, or was it just a channel specific?
Yeah, this is, I think, referring to what I was speaking about. So they'll basically, I would say yes, like that's what we notice for all channels. But again, as I mentioned, like for probably everybody else, our by far biggest channels are Google and Facebook. So this is like true for sure for those channels. For other channels, I think it is for most of them at least, which we have on a bigger scale.
Yeah, I would just add here, that we have actually seen both CPI decrease as well as LTV decrease. But luckily for us, the ROI remained fairly stable, or at least increased a little bit. Plus, with the increased volume, the bottom line was actually better here.
Okay.
Okay, I think like we are going to the end. Thank you very much for your all answers, your great presentations and discussion. There was the question around the if the presentation will be shared. Of course, we will try to do our best, but we will discuss it with our presenters if they get the permission to do it. If we go for the future, even now, we can invite you to some of our next events happening in a few weeks. Like one of that is on 8th of July. And then there is, we would of course, ask about your feedback. So if you can show the address for the form, please let us know how you saw that session. Please give us feedback. Please give the feedback to presenters. And I hope, again, it was useful for you. Thank you again, Luka. Thank you again, Mladen. Thank you again, Andrej, for spending the time, your effort, and sharing your knowledge with the audience again. And of course, thank you to everyone for joining and spending that time with us. And I hope to see you at least in this visual way and this unofficial way in a few weeks on one of the next editions. Thank you very much.